As the face of the Supremes and later a wildly successful solo artist, she broke barriers in the music industry. But behind the dazzling spotlight lies a more complicated story. A story about ambition, betrayal, and the devastating downfall of a potential future superstar. Florence Ballard, the co-founder and original lead singer of the Supremes, once had a promising career and a future as bright as Diana's. Sadly, her career spiraled into a downfall, followed by her tragic passing in her early 30s. Many believe her early death was the result of the events surrounding her final chapter with the Supremes. Was it Diana Ross's drive for dominance that sealed Ballard's fate? Or were the forces of the music industry and personal struggles too great for Florence to overcome? Let's find out. Long before she became overshadowed by Diana Ross, Florence Ballard was the heart and soul of the group that would eventually conquer the world as the Supremes. In 1959, as a teenager, Ballard co-founded the Primates, a vocal group born from Detroit's working-class neighborhoods. She personally recruited Diana Ross and Mary Wilson to join the group, bringing together the original nucleus of what would later become one of Motown's greatest success stories. Florence was the one who brought us all together, Mary Wilson later remembered. She was the one with the charisma and the voice. Florence Ballard stood out in the early years of the group's career. With her commanding stage presence and powerful, soulful voice, she was often considered the strongest vocalist among the three. Early performances had Ballard singing lead, and her natural charisma helped distinguish the Primates from other local acts. In the beginning, Diana Ross's lighter, pop-oriented style played a supporting role. However, things began to change when Motown Records founder Gordy signed the group in 1961. Under Gordy's vision, the Primates were rebranded as the Supremes, and the sound of the group began to move in a more polished, radio-friendly direction. Gordy saw star potential in Diana Ross's high, distinctive voice and began molding her into the centerpiece of the group. Ballard was gradually relegated to a backup role, a move that sowed the seeds of resentment. At first, Ballard accepted the changes silently. Privately, she was devastated by her shrinking role within the group she'd helped create. Gordy's decision to push Ross into the spotlight wasn't just a blow to Ballard's artistic pride, it also created tension within the group. In interviews years later, Diana Ross admitted that the shift in focus caused stress. "I felt the weight of carrying the group on my shoulders," she said. "It wasn't my choice. It was Barry's decision." But for Ballard, the changes went beyond professional frustration. Mary Wilson recalled how painful the transition was for Florence. She didn't just lose her leads, she lost her confidence. She felt like she was being replaced in every way. By 1963, Diana Ross was singing almost all of the group's lead vocals, including their breakout hit, "Where Did Our Love Go?", which skyrocketed to #1 on the chart. While the song launched the Supremes into international superstardom, it also solidified Ross as the face of the group. Behind the scenes, Ballard struggled to make peace with her diminishing presence. At times, she bristled at Diana Ross's growing influence. Diana started controlling everything, Ballard reportedly confided to close friends. "We weren't equals anymore." These tensions weren't just personal. They were also emblematic of the competition many artists felt as Motown grew into an unstoppable hit-making machine. Gordy demanded perfection and had little patience for anyone who didn't align with his vision. As the Supremes' fame grew, so too did the divide between Ballard and Ross. Ballard became resentful of Ross's close relationship with Gordy, which many felt gave Diana the upper hand in group decisions. Gordy's favoritism toward Ross was no secret. It was widely believed within the industry that he was grooming her for a solo career, even while the Supremes were still topping the charts. This dynamic further sidelined Ballard, leaving her feeling isolated and powerless. Florence's frustrations began to manifest in her behavior. According to multiple accounts, she started missing rehearsals and occasionally clashed with Motown executives. While it's clear Florence was struggling, the reasons behind her actions remain a subject of debate. Was it due to the increasing pressure and favoritism within the group, or was it simply the result of personal challenges that were beginning to take their toll? By the mid-1960s, the Supremes were at the height of their fame. Hit after hit dominated the charts, and Diana Ross had become a household name. But while the group shone brightly in the public eye behind the scenes, Florence Ballard found herself increasingly pushed out of the spotlight, and the group's dynamic began to unravel. Florence Ballard's frustration with her diminished role continued to grow as Diana Ross's partnership with Gordy tightened. Ballard reportedly confided to friends that she felt betrayed by both Gordy and Ross. "Diana got everything handed to her, and I was cast aside. I was there from the beginning, but it didn't matter to them," Ballard once said in an interview. The shift from a group dynamic to Diana's growing dominance didn't sit well with Ballard. The Supremes had been rebranded as Diana Ross and the Supremes in 1967, a decision that cemented Ross as the focal point at Ballard's expense. Publicly, Motown framed the change as a simple marketing decision, but many insiders saw it as another move by Gordy to elevate Diana while marginalizing Florence and Mary Wilson. Ballard was reportedly furious about the name change, viewing it as confirmation that her contributions were no longer valued. Ballard's frustrations began to spill over into her professional conduct. She began missing rehearsals and even live performances, leading to tension within the group and with Motown executives. On one infamous occasion, Ballard showed up drunk to a performance, forcing Mary Wilson and Diana Ross to perform without her. Gordy's patience quickly wore thin. In his eyes, Ballard's behavior was unprofessional and jeopardized the group's reputation. Tensions came to a head during a live performance in Las Vegas in 1967. Ballard, once again visibly intoxicated, clashed with members of the crew and caused significant delays. It was the final straw for Gordy, who had already been preparing to replace her. Just weeks later, Florence received the devastating news she was officially out of the Supremes. She was replaced by Cindy Birdsong, a member of Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. Ballard later recalled the moment, saying, "They got rid of me like I was trash." Motown attempted to frame Ballard's exit as amicable, citing creative differences in public statements. But the truth was far messier. Ballard felt blindsided and betrayed, particularly by Diana Ross. "Diana didn't fight for me," she told a reporter years later. "She was supposed to be my friend." While Ross never publicly commented on Ballard's firing, it was widely believed that she supported Gordy's decision, as the two were already planning for her eventual solo career. The fallout from Ballard's removal was devastating. Motown offered her a small, one-time buyout, reportedly just $139,000, which was quickly drained by legal fees and personal expenses. She later sued Motown but ultimately lost, leaving her with little to show for her years with the Supremes. Meanwhile, Diana Ross and the Supremes continued to break records and perform for sold-out audiences around the world, only deepening Ballard's sense of betrayal. Florence Ballard's dismissal from the Supremes in 1967 marked the start of a difficult chapter in her life. While Diana Ross and the Supremes soared to even greater fame, Ballard found herself struggling to regain her footing, financially, professionally, and emotionally. Many have since questioned whether Diana Ross played a direct role in Ballard's removal, or if her ambition inadvertently set the stage for Ballard's tragic decline. In interviews given after her departure, Ballard was vocal about feeling sidelined in the group. In an interview with Detroit Free Press in 1975, she reflected on the shift in dynamic, saying, "I felt left out and ignored after a while." She also expressed frustration over how Ross was groomed for stardom, while Ballard's powerful voice and presence were downplayed. Although Ballard never directly accused Diana of orchestrating her removal, she did admit, "If you weren't Barry's favorite, you didn't stand a chance." The favoritism shown by Gordy toward Diana Ross created an imbalance within the group that left Ballard feeling increasingly isolated. J. Randy Taraborelli, in his biography Call Her Miss Ross, writes that Ballard confided to friends about her frustrations. Florence felt she had been replaced, not just vocally but in status, by someone she once considered her equal. Gordy's efforts to center Diana Ross as the group's star were calculated and strategic, ultimately setting her up for a solo career. This left little room for other members, especially Ballard, whose strong, soulful voice was less marketable for the crossover sound Motown aimed to perfect. The 1967 name change to Diana Ross and the Supremes was a breaking point for Ballard. As recounted in Dreamgirl, My Life as a Supreme by Mary Wilson, Ballard was deeply hurt by the move, seeing it as a public confirmation that her time in the spotlight was over. Mary wrote, Florence had difficulty accepting that we were no longer equals. The focus was all on Diana, and for Florence, that was devastating. Accounts from those close to the group suggest that Ross played an active role in maintaining her dominance. According to Mark Ribowski's book, The Supremes, a saga of Motown dreams, success, and betrayal, Ballard felt that Ross's ambition and close relationship with Gordy gave her leverage, effectively leaving Ballard without allies. Ribowski writes, Florence believed Diana wouldn't stop until she had everything. She never forgave her for what she saw as betrayal. After leaving the group, Ballard struggled to rebuild her life. She launched a solo career that failed to gain traction, partly due to Motown's refusal to support her. Ballard herself described this lack of support as one of her greatest frustrations. They turned their backs on me. The ones I built my life around were gone, she reportedly told a confidant. These words, highlighted in several biographies, underscore the sense of abandonment she felt from both Motown and her former bandmates. Diana Ross, meanwhile, was noticeably reserved about Ballard's struggles. While Ross publicly honored Ballard's contributions after her death in 1976, expressing condolences and describing her as a vital part of the Supremes, she rarely addressed their fractured relationship. Despite this statement, critics have pointed out that Ross's rise to fame seemed to come at the expense of her former bandmate. J. Randy Taraborelli argues in Call Her Miss Ross that Ross may not have directly caused Ballard's downfall but remains complicit through her inaction, writing, Diana didn't push Florence out, but she didn't pull her back in either. Ross's connection to Ballard's tragic fate has been a source of controversy for decades. Whether she actively contributed to Ballard's dismissal or simply prioritized her own career, the perception of her as a calculating figure has persisted. As Mark Ribowski notes, Diana's star only rose higher, but Florence was left behind, both by the group and by Diana herself. In the years following Florence Ballard's tragic death in 1976, Diana Ross rarely spoke about her former bandmate publicly. While Ross's career reached unprecedented heights, the shadow of Ballard's struggles loomed large over the Supremes' legacy. Fans and critics alike questioned whether Ross felt any sense of guilt or regret over what had unfolded between the two, particularly in the context of Ballard's removal from the group and her subsequent decline. Shortly after Ballard's death, Diana Ross made a point of attending her funeral, reportedly paying for the floral arrangements and showing a quiet but respectful presence. In her remarks during the service, she called Florence a vital part of what made the Supremes great, yet some saw her actions as performative and criticized Ross for what was perceived as a lack of support during Ballard's years of hardship. Mary Wilson, in her book Dreamgirl, reflected on Ross's absence during Ballard's darkest days. We all mourned Florence, but the truth is that by the time she needed us, we were already gone. Over the years, Ross's reflections on Ballard remained guarded, often focusing on their early successes rather than the conflicts that marked their time together. In a 1981 interview with People magazine, she touched briefly on Ballard, saying, "There was so much pressure back then and we were all just trying to survive. Florence had her struggles and I only wish things had turned out differently." Critics noted that Ross's comments seemed to deflect personal responsibility, framing the situation as a broader systemic issue within Motown rather than addressing her role directly. Florence Ballard's story continued to haunt Ross's legacy. In the years that followed, numerous biographers scrutinized Ross's actions and inactions regarding Ballard. J. Randy Taraborelli, in Call Her Miss Ross, wrote, "Diana has spent her life moving forward, but Florence's fall remains the one chapter of her life she has never fully confronted." Taraborelli also suggests that while Ross may not have orchestrated Ballard's removal, her prioritization of her career left little room for the solidarity that might have helped Ballard through her struggles. However, Ross's defenders argue that her rise to superstardom came with its own pressures, particularly as a black woman navigating a white-dominated music industry. Berry Gordy's grooming of Ross as a solo act placed immense expectations on her shoulders, leaving her with little time or capacity to manage the personal dynamics within the group. When questioned about her relationships with former bandmates in the 1990s, Ross reportedly stated, "I've always been focused on moving forward. That doesn't mean I don't care, it's just how I deal with things." Mary Wilson, who maintained a closer friendship with Ballard, later speculated that Ross's inability to engage with Ballard's struggles might have stemmed from self-preservation. In Dreamgirl, Wilson wrote, "Diana wasn't unkind, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. That's how she kept going." As the years passed, Diana Ross participated in occasional tributes to the Supremes that mentioned Ballard, acknowledging her contributions to the group's early success. However, these tributes often omitted references to the tensions that later defined their relationship. This omission left many fans feeling that the true depth of their story remained untold. Ross's limited commentary on Ballard has left room for interpretation. Some view her as a product of the Motown system, caught in an environment that valued success over personal bonds. Others see her as someone whose ambition came at a cost, whether intentional or not. What remains certain is that Florence Ballard's story, her talent, her struggles, and her ultimate fate continues to be an integral, if painful, part of Diana Ross's legacy. The story of Florence Ballard's downfall and Diana Ross's rise is a complicated chapter in music history, one marked by ambition, betrayal, and an unforgiving industry. While Ross went on to become an international superstar, Ballard's legacy became one of lost potential, tainted by the struggles she faced after her removal from the Supremes. Many argue that Ross's drive for success overshadowed her responsibility to her bandmate, but the truth likely lies in a mix of personal ambition and the harsh realities of the Motown machine. The dynamics within the Supremes were not just about individual relationships, they were shaped by a system that thrived on competition. Today, Florence Ballard is remembered as one of Motown's unsung heroes, a voice many believe was never fully realized in her short lifetime. Diana Ross, for all her undeniable brilliance and contributions to music, continues to face questions about the price of her success. Their intertwined stories are a reminder of the sacrifices and collateral damage often hidden behind the glamour of fame. Ultimately, the Supremes' legacy is a bittersweet one. Their music stands as a testament to their collective talent, but the fractures within the group serve as a powerful reminder of the human cost of ambition and stardom.